Centuries ago, people went to bed differently than they do today. Without electric light, without the noise of the city, in silence and complete darkness, listening to the natural rhythms of nature. Their sleep was not just rest, but an essential element of survival, recuperation, and health in the harsh conditions of the Middle Ages. How has our sleep changed over the centuries? Can we consider that modern comfort has really improved the quality of rest? What if the habitual night hours and sleep habits of today's man are just a myth, far removed from the natural needs of the body? Why exactly can medieval sleep rituals help bring health and vigor back into our busy lives? In this video, we'll uncover the secrets that medieval people kept for centuries and find out how their sleep can be better than today's. Night hours and the natural rhythm of sleep. In the Middle Ages, night rest was subject to strict natural laws. People were guided solely by the alternation of day and night, with no electric lights or modern clocks to regulate their regimen. Without artificial light, evening and the onset of darkness marked the beginning of the preparation for sleep, and the first lighting of candles was already a sign that the day was coming to an end. People went to bed shortly after sunset, plunging into darkness, which stimulated the production of melatonin, a sleep hormone necessary for healthy rest. It is interesting that in those times, the phenomenon of double sleep was widespread, when the night was divided into two separate phases. The first, deeper and longer, and the second, shorter, often accompanied by wakefulness and even household chores or prayers. During this interval of nocturnal wakefulness, people could get up, talk to each other, smoke herbs, pray, or engage in quiet activities without disturbing the general rhythm of rest. This tradition, mentioned as far back as the English chronicles of the 16th century, is shocking to modern man, accustomed to a continuous sleep without awakenings. The absence of artificial light in modern technology forced the body to live in perfect harmony with circadian rhythms, the biological clock that regulates sleep, wakefulness, body temperature, and many other processes. This harmony with nature promoted health, preventing insomnia and overwork, which today are considered real epidemics. While modern people often suffer from sleep disturbances due to constant exposure to screens and light, medieval man immersed himself in the silence of the night, allowing his body to rest as much as possible. The study of chronicles and letters of those times confirms that natural light was the main regulator of the rhythm of life, and even kings and nobles could not resist the influence of darkness and dawn. Thus, the understanding and acceptance of double sleep and blind obedience to the natural cycles of day and night formed healthy habits that many today are just trying to reclaim. It is important to note that this rhythm was not just a physiological necessity, but a cultural tradition deeply rooted in the everyday life and religious practices of medieval society. This explains why, until the 19th century, people in Europe maintained this sleep pattern despite advances in technology and changing lifestyles. During the Middle Ages, the night hours were a time of rest and recovery, and the entire human body worked in close harmony with nature, without the artificial stimuli that often disrupt the normal cycle today. It makes you wonder how far the modern way of life is from what was laid down by nature and thousands of years of human experience. Understanding the night hours and the natural rhythm of sleep provides not only a historical perspective, but also important lessons for modern humans looking for ways to improve the quality of their rest and rejuvenation in a fast-paced and noisy world. This ancient rhythm reminds us to respect the biological clock, allowing ourselves to rest when the body really needs it, rather than following imposed schedules and external stimuli. The bottom line is that nighttime hours and natural sleep rhythms are key to understanding why medieval sleep was often deeper and more efficient than modern sleep, which is filled with artificial light and stress. And perhaps by returning to these ancient practices, modern man can restore health and improve the quality of life. Primitive beds and sleeping places. In the Middle Ages, the most common sleeping place for peasants was the simplest construction of wooden frames, on which they laid bales or mattresses made of straw. This material was available, inexpensive, and provided at least some softness and warmth. Nobles, on the other hand, could afford more elaborate beds with carved wooden frames stuffed with feathers or wool and topped with expensive fabrics that protected against the cold and improved the quality of sleep. Despite all the differences, common to all was the lack of modern mattresses and springs, which only began to appear in later centuries, making the bed stiff and sometimes uncomfortable. Peasants' beds were most often on wooden planks or directly on the floor, which often led to the penetration of cold and damp, especially in the damp climate of Europe. Straw mattresses were covered with cloth or hides to protect them from the cold, and sometimes the whole family slept together to keep warm and safe. The difference between the beds of nobles and peasants was not only in material, but also in quantity. Common people could share beds where several people slept, while nobles valued personal space and privacy, even when sleeping. Historical documents and archaeological finds confirm that wooden beds in the homes of nobles were often decorated with carvings and even covered with wax to protect against insects, and the beds themselves were located in warm rooms with fireplaces, which greatly improved the quality of rest. At the same time, peasant huts remained cold and damp, which directly affected the health and sleep strength of their inhabitants, provoking joint diseases and chronic fatigue. Scientists believe that such conditions conditioned increased endurance and hardiness of medieval man, but at the same time made his sleep intermittent and superficial. The quality of the bed and sleeping place was one of the important factors affecting the overall health of a person, especially considering that in the Middle Ages, there were no special pillows and blankets, which today are considered mandatory for a comfortable sleep. Often, rolled-up clothes or herb sacks were used to soften the stiffness of the bed and provide aromatherapy to promote relaxation. Interestingly, even the simplest straw mattresses were replaced or shaken regularly to avoid the accumulation of dirt and vermin, as a clean bed was important for health and longevity. In addition, during the Middle Ages, beds often became a place for social activity. Here, important issues were discussed, family conversations or even negotiations were held, which reinforced the symbolic importance of the bed as a center of home and security. However, physical discomfort due to insufficiently comfortable sleeping places forced people to get up more often at night and move around, which, according to modern researchers, could have a positive effect on blood circulation and general health. Thus, even primitive beds and humble dormitories, despite their limitations, served a vital function and were an integral part of medieval man's daily life. Sleepwear and bedding. In the Middle Ages, sleepwear was a far cry from what it is today, and the main materials used were linen and wool, fabrics that had the natural properties of keeping warm while allowing air to pass through, which is especially important in cold, damp dwellings. Sleeping in clothes was common because many homes were unheated, and sleeping quarters were often located in separate unheated rooms or common areas where the temperature dropped dramatically at night. Linen, due to its lightness and ability to absorb moisture, helped the body to breathe, reducing perspiration and preventing hypothermia, and wool provided an additional layer of protection from cold and drafts. Bed linens, in most cases, were also made of natural fabrics, simple linen or woolen cloths that were regularly washed and dried outdoors to avoid the accumulation of bacteria and parasites, which was critical to health. The absence of synthetics and modern chemical fibers allowed the skin to breathe and maintain the body's natural microclimate, which contributed to a better quality of sleep despite the modest living conditions. Cotton was even used in some parts of Europe, but its distribution was limited and expensive, so linen remained the main material available to the general public. The comfort and hygiene of the sleeping place depended largely on how carefully the family took care of clothes and bedding, because washing was a labor-intensive process and was done infrequently, especially in winter. Some historians point out that wearing nightgowns and dressing in woolen cloaks even at night helped people keep warm and avoid colds, which was especially important during epidemics. Interestingly, wealthy people often had special bedrooms where softer and more expensive fabrics were used, while commoners were content with what was available, emphasizing social differences in even the most intimate domestic details. Occasionally, special fillings for pillows and blankets, such as bird down or sheep's wool, were used, which greatly increased comfort, but this remained the prerogative of the nobility. At the same time, peasants most often slept on straw or rags, trying to wrap themselves up as much as possible to survive the cold night. Despite their simplicity, such clothing and bedding met the body's essential needs for warmth and hygiene, as evidenced by numerous archaeological finds and documents from that era. Thus, sleepwear and linens in the Middle Ages were not only matters of comfort, but also of survival, as natural fabrics helped maintain a healthy sleep and prevented illnesses associated with hypothermia and poor hygiene. These factors made the night's rest qualitative and restorative, which was essential in the face of hard physical labor and constant threats from the outside world. Ultimately, the simplicity and naturalness of medieval sleepwear proved to be one of the secrets to the good health and stamina of those who lived in that era. Temperature and ventilation in bedrooms. Medieval homes had their own unique features that directly affected the temperature and air quality of the bedrooms, where one had to rest after a hard day. Fireplaces were mostly located in living rooms, serving as a source of heat, but not always able to heat the bedroom, which was often located in a separate room or on an upper floor with thick stone or wooden walls. These walls provided protection from the cold outside, but also prevented free air circulation, which could make bedrooms either too cold in the winter or stuffy in the hot season. Houses often had gaps in the wooden shutters in between the boards, which, although they created drafts, encouraged the natural ventilation so essential to good health, for stale air could quickly lead to the spread of disease. Despite the cold, fresh air was considered essential for a good night's sleep and the prevention of respiratory disease, which is why many medieval people preferred to sleep with the windows ajar or in well-ventilated rooms, even if it meant feeling extra cold. Archaeological and historical evidence confirms that additional insulation, measures such as curtains, leather flaps, and padded blankets, were often used in winter to retain heat and mitigate the effects of drafts. Modern bedroom comfort with temperature control and an efficient ventilation system seems incomparably more convenient, but medieval realities also have their advantages. Cold and fresh air helped avoid overheating of the body, which can disrupt sleep cycles and contribute to night sweats and illnesses. Moreover, modern homes with sealed windows sometimes provoke air stagnation and the accumulation of allergens, making sleep less healthy, whereas in the Middle Ages, freshness, even with the risk of colds, was seen as a necessary good. At the same time, drastic temperature changes and dampness could seriously compromise the sleep and health of residents, especially those who could not afford additional insulation or lived in poorly constructed dwellings. Medieval bedrooms were also often fitted with stone or wooden floors, without carpets or insulation, making them cold and requiring special attention to sleeping clothes and positioning on the bed to avoid hypothermia. But with natural ventilation and the ability to control the amount of air, residents could minimize the risk of stagnation and microbial infections, which was critical in the absence of modern medicine. It is interesting that in some regions of Europe, chimneys and vents were used to regulate the microclimate in dwellings, which helped to remove excess moisture and heat the air in the cold season. Thus, temperature and ventilation in medieval bedrooms represented a complex balance between cold and freshness that significantly affected the quality of sleep and general health. And the inhabitants themselves, using natural materials and architectural features, knew how to adapt to the harsh conditions. This unique combination of openness and protection helped to maintain circadian rhythms, strengthen immunity, and survive in harsh environments that seem distant and unfamiliar to modern humans. Despite the inconveniences, living without artificial heating and air conditioning tempered body and spirit, forming a special experience worthy of study and respect. Bedtime rituals. Medieval people didn't just go to bed, but had a whole set of rituals that helped them prepare for a night's rest and clear their minds of the day's worries. The most important part of this ritual was prayer. It was an integral part of life and served not only as a spiritual support, but also as a way to find inner peace before going to sleep, because faith and protection from above was especially important in difficult and unpredictable times. In addition to prayers, reading religious texts or holy books in the homes of the nobility and clergy became a kind of ritual that helped set the mood for peaceful sleep and spiritual purification. While peasant families often told stories and legends by the fire to strengthen family ties. Talking by the fire or quiet conversations in the family circle occupied an important place in preparation for sleep, contributing to the release of tension and emotional relief, which in conditions of hard work and constant health hazards was especially necessary. Such rituals, whether singing prayers together or simply sharing news, created a sense of security and community, which allowed people to relax and fall into sleep more easily. Historical chronicles and household records confirm that it was at this time in the houses reigned a special atmosphere of coziness and tranquility, which is so lacking in modern man, immersed in an endless stream of information and stress. Family traditions regarding sleep encompass not only evening rituals, but also the allocation of sleeping places, where often the younger and older members of the family rested side by side, sharing warmth and care. Recreation together strengthened social bonds and was important for survival, especially on cold winter nights when every extra source of warmth made a huge difference. In addition, certain customs, such as fumigating rooms with herbs or using special amulets, were intended to protect sleep from evil spirits and night fears, indicating a deep interaction between everyday life and the worldview of medieval man. Household rituals also played an important role in preparing for sleep. Cleaning the sleeping place, preparing a warm drink of herbs, putting the children to bed, all these actions helped to smoothly end the day and ensure quality rest. Given that night sleep was not only a time of recuperation, but also the only period of rest in a harsh world, it was treated with special awe and respect. The influence of religious and cultural traditions on the shaping of sleep rituals can also be traced through the architecture of dwellings, where bedrooms were often located closer to the home chapel or family altar, emphasizing the sacred significance of rest. Thus, bedtime rituals in the Middle Ages were more than just a habit. They were a carefully constructed set of practices that combined spirituality, psychological support, and social connections, providing a person with not only physical, but also emotional and spiritual rest. This ancient experience can tell modern man a lot about the importance of preparing for sleep and restoring vitality, which is often missed in the pursuit of technological comfort and the fast pace of life. In sum, the traditions of the Middle Ages show that quality sleep is not just a physiological necessity, but an entire ritual that can be the key to health and mental balance. Sleep and survival. Why sleep was important in an era of war and famine. In the Middle Ages, when life was full of constant threats, from famine to wars and epidemics, sleep became not just a necessity, but a vital tool for recuperation that helped people maintain endurance and readiness for difficult trials. Despite the primitive conditions and lack of modern conveniences, sleep was the key to survival, for without it, man quickly lost the ability to perform the physical and mental labor necessary to cultivate the land, hunt, or defend the home. Under conditions of constant stress, when fear of raids, disease, or starvation remained a reality of every day, the quality of sleep often suffered. Light awakenings, disturbing dreams, and intermittent rest were the norm, which imposed an imprint on the entire rhythm of life and health of the people of the time. Historical sources indicate that peasants and artisans could not afford deep and long sleep, as they had to get up early to cope with numerous duties and be ready for any surprises. To adapt to these harsh conditions, people developed special skills: the ability to fall asleep quickly, to rest in short cycles, and to stay awake even after an incomplete sleep. This state of wakefulness allowed medieval man to stay alert, notice the slightest signs of danger, and react instantly, which was often a matter of life and death. In this sense, sleep in the Middle Ages was not so much a time of complete relaxation as a period of partial recovery, during which the body and brain worked at maximum capacity to maintain vitality under extreme conditions. That said, many historians have noted that this intermittent distribution of sleep, known as double sleep, with a first deep phase, then a period of wakefulness followed by a second phase of rest, may have been more natural for humans than today's continuous 7 to 8 hours of sleep, as it allowed for rational use of nighttime and gave a chance to prepare for possible dangers. In an era when lighting was non-existent and homes were subject to frequent attacks, waking up frequently and looking around you were important elements of survival. Thus, sleep in the Middle Ages was not just a physiological process, but an active part of a survival strategy adapted to the harsh conditions of life, in which stress and threats shaped a particular rhythm of rest. This unique experience can help modern humans understand how adaptations to external conditions affect sleep quality, and why historical lifestyles, despite their simplicity, included a deeply considered attitude toward nighttime rest. Knowing these facts gives you a new perspective on your own sleep habits and an appreciation that modern comfort conditions can have both pros and unexpected cons for health and stamina. Sleep and social status. In the Middle Ages, sleep habits varied considerably according to a person's social status, and these differences reflected not only the level of comfort, but also the very structure of society itself, where nobles had access to more comfortable conditions, while peasants had to make do with modest and often harsh circumstances. Wealthy landowners and nobles slept on soft feather beds surrounded by fabrics and rugs, allowing them to spend the night in relative warmth and comfort, while most peasants used straw bales and simple wooden frames, which directly affected the quality of their rest and recuperation. At the same time, the role of servants, guards, and watchmen was an integral part of the organization of night rest in the homes of the nobility. These people not only monitored security, but also helped to create a peaceful atmosphere, allowing hosts to sleep without disturbance, whereas peasants, who often lived in common houses or village estates, shared nighttime with numerous neighbors and animals, greatly reducing privacy and comfort. In public spaces, such as taverns or community houses, nighttime had a different function. It became a time of socializing, discussion, and sometimes even trade, which clearly showed the social nature of sleep as an inseparable part of life. Historical chronicles describe that the nobility had special customs related to preparing for the night: prayers, reading, conversations, while peasants, because of physical fatigue and the need to recover for a new day of labor, rarely had the time or energy for long rituals, confining themselves to a quick nap after dinner. These differences in sleep habits emphasize not only the economic but also the cultural distance between strata of society, where each group adapted to its own conditions, forming unique patterns of nocturnal rest. On the other hand, the communal aspects of nighttime, sleeping together in huts, collective guard duty, and even praying together, created a sense of security and unity among the common people, strengthening social bonds and helping them cope with the hardships of life in unstable times. The publicity of nighttime was also manifested in the fact that in some cases, night rituals and traditions became part of community festivals and ceremonies, which once again emphasized the importance of sleep not only as a physiological, but also as a social phenomenon. Thus, sleep in the Middle Ages was deeply connected to social status and cultural differences. And understanding these differences allows us to look at the historical era through more than just the prism of everyday life, but also through the complex relationships between status, responsibilities, and personal leisure time, which today can provide interesting parallels for thinking about the contemporary distribution of resources and sleep conditions. Harmful habits and their absence in medieval dreaming. Medieval people, deprived of modern technology and gadgets, lived in conditions where there was no screen, no artificial light, or excessive noise before bedtime, which greatly favored their natural biorhythms and allowed the body to sink into a deep, restorative sleep without irritating factors. In those days, no one drank a cup of strong coffee or strong tea in the late afternoon, flipped through the news feed on their smartphone, or switched the TV. All life ended as the sun went down. And waking up was closely linked to dawn and the natural cycle of day and night, providing a natural, harmonious rhythm of rest. The sounds of a medieval night, the quiet rustling of leaves, the cries of owls, the splashing of water in wells, or the quiet crackling of a fire in a fireplace, created a natural sound environment conducive to relaxation and distressing. Unlike today's constant hum of technology and city noise, which are often the cause of chronic sleep deprivation and stress, complete darkness in dwellings due to the absence of electric lighting and artificial light sources promoted the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone, which made the night's rest deeper and more complete, while today even a weak screen light can disrupt biorhythms and worsen the quality of sleep. In today's society, bad habits such as late caffeine intake, drinking alcohol before bedtime, and spending long hours with gadgets are common. This disrupts the body's natural relaxation processes and leads to difficulty falling asleep, fragmented sleep, and chronic fatigue, whereas the medieval lifestyle, with its lack of these factors, was inherently more favorable to health. Historical sources and chroniclers' diaries testify that people of that time, despite hard life and constant deprivation, often noted sound sleep as one of the few gifts of nature that helped to survive and preserve strength in harsh conditions. This natural sleep rhythm, devoid of modern stressors and unhealthy habits, could be considered one aspect that modern humans should adopt by consciously limiting exposure to digital devices and stimulants before bedtime, to regain lost harmony and get a healthy night's rest. Although the living conditions of the Middle Ages were much more difficult, the absence of modern bad habits created the basis for better and more natural sleep, which remains an important lesson and source of inspiration today. What modern man can learn from medieval sleep practices? Medieval people lived in a world where the cycles of day and night dictated the rhythms of life, and this allowed them to be deeply synchronized with the natural circadian rhythms that modern humans increasingly ignore due to the constant presence of artificial light and gadgets that disrupt sleep and its quality. Giving up screens before bed, which was a natural rule back then, is becoming a real challenge today, but it is what helps the eyes relax and the brain prepare for a full night's rest, restoring the energy that is so necessary in our fast-paced lives. Bedtime rituals, whether evening prayers, quiet conversations by the fire, or simply contemplating the flame of a candle, helped people of the Middle Ages smooth the transition from wakefulness to sleep, reducing anxiety and setting the body to rest. And it is this practice that can be helpful to the modern person trying to get rid of stress and information overload before bedtime. Realizing the importance of such habits helps us today to form our own rituals, which help to shift attention and prepare the body for night rest, which is important in the conditions of modern rhythm of life and constant pressure of information. Medieval dwellings built of stone and wood with thick walls and natural gaps provided the necessary ventilation and maintained an optimal temperature, allowing people to sleep in cool, but not the cold conditions that modern research proves as optimal for health and sleep quality. Understanding this aspect, lost in the era of central heating and sealed windows, can inspire us to change our sleeping conditions, to properly ventilate our rooms and lower the temperature at night, which greatly improves the quality of rest and promotes a deeper recovery of the body. Thus, studying medieval sleep practices teaches us to appreciate natural cycles, to cherish rituals that help us calm down and attune to rest, and also to take care of the physical environment of sleep, creating conditions that maximize health and vitality, which is becoming a particularly important and valuable skill in today's world. Myths about bad medieval sleep and reality. Stereotypes that medieval sleep was dirty, uncomfortable, and restless are deeply rooted in the modern consciousness, thanks to literature and movies. But these perceptions are far from always reflecting the real picture of life in those times. When people, despite limited material resources, knew how to adapt to conditions and create for themselves a sufficiently comfortable space for recreation. Archaeological finds and written records show that peasants used straw, herbs, and even aromatic plants to fill their beds, which promoted cleanliness and hygiene, while nobles had wooden and fabric beds, often decorated and manicured, indicating a concern for comfort and health in their sleep. Their sleep was perhaps more natural in its structure and cycles, as the absence of artificial light and electronics facilitated a more deeply immersive night's rest and double sleep, dividing the night into two phases with a break, helped the body to better recover and adapt to life, which is supported by studies by historians and sleep experts. While modern people often suffer from insomnia caused by stress, noise, and overstimulation, medieval inhabitants lived in the rhythm of nature, which created a favorable environment for regenerating strength and maintaining health. Comparing this to modern sleep problems such as constant screen exposure, lack of fresh air, and overheated sleeping quarters, it is evident that the sleep habits and conditions of the Middle Ages can provide valuable lessons on how to take care of one's rest. Historical experience shows that even in simple and sometimes harsh conditions, it was possible to find the balance that we so often lose today, which makes us reconsider our views on bad sleep and see medieval practices as a source of wisdom and inspiration. You and I have just traveled through the twilight corridors of the Middle Ages, where nights were darker but dreams were perhaps deeper. Where, in the silence of stone houses, people fell asleep to the crackle of wood, not to the light of screens. Where rest was not only a necessity, but a ritual, embedded in the rhythms of nature. They didn't know about circadian rhythms, but they lived by them. They didn't have mattresses with shape memory, but they slept in such a way that they woke up with renewed vigor. We are used to thinking of their everyday life as rough and clumsy, but sometimes simplicity hides a wisdom we have long lost. And maybe today, in a world full of unsettling nights and an overabundance of information, we should look back, inspired by those who knew the value of true peace. Put the phone away, dim the lights, breathe in the cool air, and just rest as they rested. Their sleep was not interrupted by notifications. Their night belonged only to them. And maybe that's the misconception. We haven't progressed, we've just forgotten what it's like to really sleep. If you are close to this silence of the past, If you want more stories that bring back what we have lost, subscribe to our channel. Here, eras come alive, and in each video you will find not only knowledge, but also the peace that we miss so much.